kali mangiling.
This war started off over a killing, a murder of one of our own Bougainvillean women. She was a nurse, and she was murdered by plantation workers. The moment the woman was pronounced dead, the nurse was pronounced dead, I got a word from Francis Ona saying, I am no longer listening to you. I am no longer going to be listening to the provincial government and also to the national government. This war is now going to become a war for independence. We cannot allow people outside of Bougainville coming and murdering and butchering, our own women, our own people.
I call it a war because, the PNG Defense Force was mandated to come to Bougainville and shoot to kill. So, to me, it's like it's a war, not a crisis. It went beyond the crisis and conflict situation.
In a region named after peace, many Pacific Islanders had no idea of the real extent of the tragedy unfolding in Bougainville. For Bougainville, the economic prosperity from being the copper mine jewel in the crown of Papua New Guinea had its dark side. Social and environmental change threatened many Bougainvilleans. By the time former mine employee Francis Ona turned landowners against the Australian-owned mine and forced it shut down, Bougainville was ripe for conflict. Enaha Kwa and her family had been amongst those who left in 1990, before the Papua New Guinea blockade cut Bougainville off from the world.
When you think of home, you think of all the things that are familiar to you. And for me, all the things that are familiar are here. If I were to bring my husband to my home, it would be to Bougainville, not really to Mosby.
Arava town was a paradise on its own. It was something that was so beautiful. Everything was just there for everybody to enjoy. I can remember people running around and mothers and children crying, and everybody didn't know what to do.
We never thought that Bougainvilleans, the way that they are, we always thought that Arawa would become a huge regional center. It would become a big city. We would have. Do you know that Panguna was actually planned to be a university center when the mine closed?
The unfortunate victims, that caught themselves in the crossfire were women in most cases, and of course children in most cases. Many, of course, died from, unavailability of medicine. Many died because of complications of childbirth. Many died because of, rape and murder in some cases.
The women were crying almost every day and night. The women were deprived of many things, of their freedom, of not being able to control their sons. The most grave suffering that they went through is that when women refused to give up that beautiful virtue of womanhood. And many of them suffered and died. There are some who suffered and struggled but are still alive today. But for those who have died, there's no one to tell their story.
In Bougainville, widows are not just those whose husbands have died. They include the many more women whose non-Bougainvillean husbands had left because of the crisis and never returned. Orphans are children who've lost one or both parents to the war. There are also children whose mothers were impregnated during rapes committed by soldiers from both sides of the conflict. There's no way of knowing just how many widows and orphans are living in Bougainville today. In the midst of all the development and peace building, women and children are still trying to speak for themselves on how a society which prided itself on being innovative, successful and matrilineal fell apart.
One of them whom I can mention, her name's Merita. She's from Panguna. She was shot dead on her head because she refused to have sex with an enemy. And my own sister, my blood sister, who is second last born in the family, was messed up very badly because she refused to have sex with 9 soldiers. The last one came in, told her to get all her clothes off, to be naked, and she said to him, "I've never been naked in front of anyone." And he said to her that he'll shoot her, and she said, "Give me 5 minutes." She knelt down, she prayed, and then when she stood up, she said to him, "Now you can shoot me." But then he trembled and the gun fell down, and she shouted, and the people on the other side heard, and even the leader of those PNG army came over, but then they reconciled after that.
One time I asked my eldest son, he's 18 years. I asked him, what is it that what makes you sad when you think about the crisis? He told me, "Mother, I still recall the time when the BRS came to our house and harassed you out of the house and took you into the bushes. The lady whom I went with up into the bush, whom they took with me, when we came back, she was raped by, I don't know how many of them, maybe 5 of them, 5 boys went in. She was a newly married woman, and she was with their husband in their house, and these guys came and took the husband out from their house.
During the height of this crisis, here we know, there were women who had children, even today they're not married just because they had a child during the crisis. So these are the ones that are really suffering too, I know. Because of the shame, and they're so disadvantaged, they don't talk about their needs, they don't talk in the public. So what the crisis had done to them is, you just can't believe it. They are just staying in the village now.
The experiences people shared showed that no matter what part of wartime Bougainville families were in, whether it was the care centres, village homes, or in the BRA-controlled areas, people shared the same stories. Women, children, the elderly, and men who did not want to fight were under attack from both sides. No one was safe, whether sleeping at night or looking for food by day. It did not matter anymore how the crisis had started. New enemies were created, and reasons for fighting and hating changed by the day.
Even look sabe also in Bougainville na mi work lo fight back one time Bougainville because brata blomi and been depends now also all relatives blomi or live in BRA.
And one day some of my men came back after operation, very happy, saying that we have killed one of the enemy. But they didn't talk about it that much. For some reason, they didn't give me the details. And later, I found out that the person they described as the enemy was a member of the resistance force, and he was my wife's cousin. So I was faced in a difficult position, whether to cry as a leader for the enemy, or not to cry in front of my men, or cry for my brother-in-law.
Me play being walk with guns, firing. So, me being hard straight. Now all communication wise, whatever, is being cut off.
When they were firing, all the bullets were coming through our village from very low level, a level that it can shoot a person, walking, and above the roof, because in the night you can see the bullet flying, and it flies like a firefly, but it's in a very fast speed.
My brother went to Lalaho. He used to work there with SHRM to pick up his pay. He goes there to pick up his pay, and he was grabbed by the Papua New Guinea soldiers and termed as a militant or a BRA. Put in the car, his hands were tied at his back, his eyes were tied with a piece of lap or a piece of clothing, driven down to Aropa Airport, was bashed up. All his teeth were bashed out by the barrel of the gun. There were knife wounds all over his body, and finally shot dead.
One old lady went to the camp, taking her donuts to sell to the PNG soldiers, and she didn't know. All of us didn't know what happened, because we were thinking that it was just their usual thing, firing the guns. And she went there, and she was surprised to see all these 15 men lying flat on the ground with all the skin, part of the skin being cut, and their hair were hanging, cuts around their bodies, removed all their trousers, and even cut their men, and she couldn't say anything. And the PNG soldiers were asking her if she could identify if they were boys from Tin Puts, but she couldn't recognize them.
The saddest part of it is that we are not landowners to Bougainville copper mine. My brother who died had no 5 toya in his tummy, but he was killed, an innocent man. And I'll never forget my mother saying, "Francis Ona, where are you? Why wouldn't you defend my son?" My son grew up with the money that I sweat, the sweat from my bro. I paid his school fees, I made copra, not from the copper mine. We don't receive any compensation. That's the saddest part. And it's not just my brother-in-law, my nephew, my cousin. 6 of them were shot dead in just one day.
They were insisting to take the bodies and throw them out in the ocean. My grandfather stood by and told them, you're a fighter, you are soldiers, you're both soldiers, and you have killed each other. And I am not a soldier, I'm not your enemy. I'm just a villager, I'm not a soldier. Whatever you did, you've done it. But the bodies, leave the bodies, and I will go and give them a decent burial. And they brought them in, piled them, like pigs or animals lying in there, piled up in the back of the truck. It is a scene that I will never forget.
One time, living spray, all army living spray, ego na all BRA to living spray. Me living stop na Mail Street. Because me no sabi one by happen lo me plan. But close to me living run away, one pulling all picking about. Me heart straight on by me must explain him. Me plus just sleep nothing. Me take him mama's 5 hours time only walk long shoot out. Me talk him me plus in Karai one time. This plus time me got 2 plus bikini twins. One plus dead papa blow me plus kissing. One another plus me being kissing. Me plus just spoon down about. Up and down, up and down. Me plus roll also one plus all stone about. Because something I make come up time because time me play no meaning also something by come up. And me set stories straight. This play whole day me play no bin kai. Me play bin bello me play bin pula lomporet.
During the crisis, we had to cross these rivers, number of rivers, especially in the night. I mean, I had 3 children, mother of small children, 3. I had to decide what things to carry. This is what basic stuff, because I wouldn't be moving with the whole house.
Long side long wasimolo clothing, me plus sabe, usimolo lemon. Long was too, me plus sabe wasimolo head blow me plus grass. One time all lemon, so let me good plan.
Time mi pla kam lo kain river all the same. Mi pla mas karim lo pikinini, lo likli pikini mi pla mas karim lo backside. Na olo big pla likli kol papa blol karim lo shoulder blow na mi pla crossing. Sampla hab long wara I deep too mas. So mi pla mas look lo manem hab wara ino deep too mas na mi pla crossing.
Me being worried straight because me got all picking me blow me. Time you pitching one time all this lap. Na you sabi I'm all play I'm by buruk. Say yes, but me sa time me plus I stop long mus me sabi double him. This buruk stop long as. In by me putting on front. Na this long na plus side by me putting long up.
Many families can speak of mothers giving birth under trees, with only leaves to wrap their newborn babies in. No one knows for sure how many mothers and babies died during childbirth, or simply because they lacked basic medicine in the bush. Today, women and families are still living with illness and symptoms left untreated during the war. Widows and orphans and children born from rape make up a key part of today's Bougainville population. The nuclear family no longer exists for many households here, as they cope with the pain and the cost of their missing fathers, brothers, and sons.
It was a miracle for me to see people sewn up just with ordinary needle and not even having the anesthetic or whatever they need in the proper hospital to be able to survive. And these women, especially women nurses, the ones who have shared with me, were very dedicated. And from what I heard from them, there was some really dreadful situation they dealt with way up in the mountains. Women who couldn't give birth well, and they assisted them as midwives and things like that.
If the baby can't come out, what we had to do is wait and come to the stage where the relatives also understand that nothing further can be done. And we are now waiting for the mother and baby to die. Because at that time it was not a normal situation. You can be mistaken for killing the mother and baby, and you will be, be dealt with by the relatives. There was no law and order.
Me, I used to feel very sorry for the widows, especially at times when men went into the bushes to gather food for their children. The women, the orphans, when the men came back, the orphans just looked and stared like there was nobody who would bring them something from the bush.
Our families were torn apart. Some became resistance and some became BRS. And then that went with the family. So we started talking to those of us in the BRS, said, enough is enough. The women are suffering because we born them. And then we tell them, we cry for you. And if I'm crying for you and telling you this, and if you don't listen, and if anything happens to you, it's too late to cry.
I've seen women cry during the conflict, even at the times when those on the other side, the Bougainvilleans were killed, whom we saw as enemies. So there were women who didn't see any difference. To them, a child was a child, a Bougainvillean was a Bougainvillean. So we had a lot of those type of experiences during the conflict.
When men with M16s come into your home and you're only 8 or 9, there's nothing you can do. They would have experienced things against their own nuclear family, against their wider family, their cousins, aunties, uncles. They've probably seen someone being killed. Either, we deal with people here who've had their father killed in front of them. We deal with people here who've had their mother raped in front of them, and those sorts of things.
From the way I used to see it, it's all to do with youths, youth revolution. And these are young people who are very, illiterate. I mean, it's just needed somebody above them to convince them to do things, and they just went for it. So they went out and they stayed out in camps, and with all the people who taught them new ideas, new ways of, hating other people, new ways of doing things. So as a result, you had a group of youths who, definitely I can term as really uncontrolled.
We work on stuff to do with alcohol, we work on trauma, we work on negotiation skills, personal development skills, communication skills. So we try to help the young men develop as many skills as they can. So when they go back to the village, they feel that they are able to contribute in some way.
Sample time now, because all picking yet, by raising all questions, why na something come up also? Why is this? Why now all sample schools is close up? We have to stop. You have to try and make the child understand why this thing is happening. Don't try long explaining long all this picking. You got, reason why people also walking this something come up. So all no pinsabe sample maybe the grade 6 students or must not understand him likilika. But then by you looking, time or lose him, time crisis equal was now. Some of our students, or lose him school, they or go join up.
Man blomi tu em plus I give me hard time all begin. Because first from beginning blomi, em start long grade preparation na crisis even so interest blomi me like go on school straight. Papa, me by me come up labor blomi you me no go on school. So em worry belong em pikini na ego kula making papa belong em tu me masih luk sabi long sem me pikini me like go to school.
Mi bin sabe to kol sem do yumi ipai to one time gan em by no na pro solving problem. Em you by asking to solve by mama one time pikini by die. All sem na yumi must come lo understanding long. Yumi must talk by lo mouse ta sol lo gan.
So you enough is enough. And then we started telling the leaders and even ourselves so that negotiation is the only way, peace talks.
The women have always been the voice of sanity, the voice of peace, and they've been very, very instrumental in convincing their sons to get rid of the guns. And the women would be the envoys between the different factions, walking through from village to village, advocating reconciliation and getting rid of guns. And I think they've achieved that without force.
Me first Mary long come Lusimbus na me come straight long section 19 where lo pespla peacekeeping post bin kam. Me being time interview long up. So me to say me, please me like in good placing down. Me nap in is lompait. You mean no kissing one pla good plus something. Me plaving sapa inap.
Time me plaving stablombus me come out. Because on our plameri, on no, or been stablombus yet na. Me must show him example. Osem me like him, me like go lompeles below Mr. Me come down now, me come lompeles. So all kita line been stablombus or Mary. Or look at me to koi Mary go pinisia. But po me plama stab me plama behind him. So only come na me pla bung one time all Mary long here. Me pla walk one time of them. Osem today me looking osem peace process. Me pla Mary walk long come together one time na strong in peace.
Time me come down. Me tara me kakem rice. Na me toko se mo sorry. This plan first time lo me taste him rice for 5 years. Me kake tulip na ito. Oh sorry. Me kake tulip one time biscuits. How many years me no been tasting?
During the crisis, you will hear a common term that said, "Now me blogata and stop same. We are now all the same, and we are starting from the bottom, and we're moving up together." And that happened between the genders too. But what made the women really stand out was that they, despite all that had happened, they stood up and said, let's work from what we have, and that's nothing.
I don't know what to do now. Time slips away. There's a day towards the sunrise. I can see another day, another day.
Because most of the children have lost their loved ones, their parents during the crisis, and the majority of the children, they have one side living and the other side died. So I can say that this project started out from my heart because I have concern for these children. We call it Arava Children's Center. We didn't want to call it orphanage because we didn't want to, say that name to make the children feel bad or what. So we just call the project Arava Children's Center.
I move around in the marketplace, on the street, in the stores, and you can hear and you can see. And even in the village where they come from, you can see if they're wearing torn clothes, and if they're crying all the time, and if the mother is beating them, then you can see definitely there's something wrong.
They don't really come out to tell us their needs. Huh? And, there's only few out of all the widows I know they're getting help. The majority they are with the community, so they can't really come out.
Yes, I think yung lo widows inogat man lo supportive mi pla. So mi pla need maybe all those ones lo oligato lo man blongol oli can help mi pla lo sad lo working house se mole sampla something we mi pla merino na working sem garden too suppose me sem mistap lo place garden too mino na working garden mi yet unless mo bla mani ali mi lokatem bush na working garden. Nasa lolo ko tin pikini ito sem miwan mi wokul sem papa mama.
The political leadership just cannot leave it to extended family or to the immediate families to handle the issues. They had to be helped, financially. When the war, that had, made many of our young mothers, widows, many of our kids, become orphans. It's a problem that, had to have a body like a government to be able to do something.
There's a passionate belief everywhere that education is important for a better Bougainville. Parents and caregivers are not the only ones putting school fees and classrooms first for their families. The return to school has been harder for the children who grew up too quickly during the war. For the young foot soldiers of the crisis, a return to the classroom can mean being a 20-year-old student struggling to read and write in a room full of 10-year-olds.
Since every time I feeling was same long me was travel man school one time lik that's all you got all travel boys can all same weight same age one time in was same long all mainland na we all being staff inside street long crisis now all not being got chance long some education now all me plan now staff one time so I think 5 flower was me flower kind man now work on staff was some plan more was staff long normal age now work on school good now me plan some plan was me plan amro sim finish on me age long education now suppose crisis in me staff now display was suppose me plan being go through long education system not best alone me plan by kissing work now.
When I was young, I used to know. The old songs my people sang.
Growing up in jungles and learning to kill have taken their toll on a generation of young Bougainvilleans, with jungle brewed alcohol providing a way to deal with that trauma.
I was too scared when I first came in '99 to go into the market because a lot of young people and frightened to see them because they have their rasta hair and they had their heads tied with the BRA army type of clothing, and they would be walking around and quite rough looking and talking very rough because they were under the influence of JJ, and this really upset me inside.
When young people don't have much of a sense of self-worth, they don't feel they can contribute anything to the community, they don't feel they can contribute anything to the family. In fact, they feel that they've let everyone down. They feel that they've got no future.
Things got out of hand and such good young people attend to something that was not good for them. And to this day, I haven't seen positive results of how they can be helped to integrate them back into their communities. It's so heartbreaking.
These are the future of Bougainville, and you see them running around like this, aimlessly, not knowing what to do in the future. You see a sick Bougainville. We can talk about whatever plans on the political level and development, whatever, but if those things come in place, who is going to do that?
Bougainville's destiny lies in the hands of its damaged youth, but their future also depends on how much can be learnt from the troubled past. For the leaders of this generation, traditional reconciliation involves shedding light on that past. Those who have killed will have to return the bones of their victims to their families and allow them to complete their grieving. But for those who have raped, no reconciliations have taken place. Atrocities against women and girl children have been buried in silence as women once more sacrifice their own healing in the interest of peace and moving on.
These are the things that war has left. The scar there, the pain is there for us to live with. If you know that you have killed someone, you will never forget in your lifetime that you killed someone. So it is also good for the murderer or the killer himself to go and dig up the bones. Even if they have to find just a button or a shoelace or a bone, they must bring it back to the family so that they cry over the bone or whatever and they give it a decent burial. It's also healing for the murderer himself and for the family.
I mean, I know that people who, maybe families who lost nearly the whole family, maybe 2 or 3 still surviving, but no, they don't really talk about it. But in their heart, you know, there's this hatred, you know, it's still there, you know, it's there. But they don't really speak it out. No, nobody talks about it, you know.
It is important that truth had to be told, truth had to be revealed, and our society supports that sort of an approach. That's why, you know, we have our reconciliations, and this is why reconciliations have been the #1 priorities for people of Bougainville to able to free yourself, you know, of what was bugging, you know, bugging you inside. You know, pour it out, share it out. Let just some kind of a justice, you know, be done.
Now, time we discuss one thing, or Mary now, we start talking more. Okay, what you do is just you look and you observe, you think ahead, and remember you have your kids. The kids that we have here now. Because even though normalcy may come up, we are still standing on the time bomb. That is how I see it personally. Anytime you pull the fuse, we go back to square one.
In 1996, I was saying, let's end this war before year 2000. Because if the war started in 1988, by the time we reach year 2000, the conflict will be 12 years. And if we have a generation that are born in 1988, by 2000 we will have a generation that will forget that they are brothers and sisters.
Women in the peace process, women building the peace. It doesn't necessarily mean that all women believe in the peace that is happening now. What it really means is that women want to have education for their children, they want to have health for their children, they want to have security for themselves. But the ideology behind it is different. You have all of these women who have these totally different political beliefs, and yet they're united in the socio-economic task that is ahead of them.
My message to them is that don't lose hope. Don't feel that nobody's going to care for you. And we're going to move forward, to look forward, to build better Bougainville, a new Bougainville, a new spirit.
Stand up for what is right and never give up. When your heart tells you that what you are doing is right, do it. If you are for peace, continue to work for peace. Continue to march for peace. There's no U-turn, no reverse. Just go ahead. No matter how humiliated you are, because they can pull all your teeth out and they can burn you alive, but the desire for peace will stand.
Eh